St. Florian, a small village nestled beside the Silver River, was once a place where fields stretched like a green carpet, dotted with chirping birds. Before the flood, each morning, the sounds of sparrows, swallows, and white storks blended with the wind blowing through the willow trees, creating a symphony of life. The villagers, though living simply, were always proud of their land, a place where nature and humanity coexisted harmoniously. But the flood last month changed everything. Water overflowed the banks, sweeping away crops, homes, and even the bird nests that once rested on the high branches. When the water receded, it left behind muddy fields, tilted rooftops, and an empty sky. The flocks of birds, like the souls of St. Florian, had vanished, leaving a heavy silence that enveloped the land. Maria, a woman in her 60s with a weathered face but gentle, bright eyes, had lived her entire life in St. Florian. She grew up amidst the stories her grandmother told about springs filled with the sounds of birds, and she spent decades weaving fabrics adorned with bird patterns, white storks, flying swallows, and little sparrows, as a way to preserve those memories. But now, while washing the fabrics by the Silver River, she felt a weight in her heart. The murky water flowed sluggishly, carrying the scent of damp earth and sorrow. The patterns on the fabric, once her pride, now served as a reminder of what had been lost. Her hands, though still agile, trembled every time they touched the cold water, as if the chill seeped into her very heart. She did not voice it, but deep down, Maria feared that St. Florian would never revive. That afternoon, as the pale sunlight was gradually obscured by gray clouds, Lara, Maria's 8-year-old granddaughter, ran up to her. Lara was the only light left in Maria's life since her parents left the village in search of work in a distant town. With her messy brown hair and eyes sparkling with curiosity, Lara always brought a bit of joy to her grandmother amid the dark days. But now, the little girl's face was flushed from running, her breath coming in quick gasps. "Grandma, there's something on the bell tower," Lara said, her voice mixed with worry and excitement, her tiny hand clutching her grandmother's sleeve. Maria set the fabric down, a wave of unease washing over her. She stood up, wiped her hands on her worn apron, and along with Lara, crossed the cobblestone path leading to the old church. St. Florian's Church, with its moss-covered stone walls and cracked roof tiles, had not rung its bells for a long time, ever since the last priest passed away a decade ago. But the towering bell tower still stood tall, like an unchanging landmark amid the changes of time. Upon arriving, they both looked up. Among the crevices of the stone at the top of the tower, a white figure lay still. It was a white stork, a bird that used to fly in flocks across the sky of St. Florian every spring, bringing with it the promise of life. Now it lay collapsed, its wings drooping, its white feathers stained with mud, a symbol of the village slowly fading away. Maria sighed, her voice deep and sad like the wind rustling through the barren fields. "It's exhausted." Inside her, a wave of emotion surged, both sorrow for the bird and pain because it mirrored the fate of St. Florian. But Lara, with the innocence of childhood, did not let the sadness linger. "Grandma, can we save it?" the little girl asked, her eyes shining with hope. They climbed up the bell tower, each step on the worn wooden stairs creaking beneath them. Maria led the way, each step heavy yet resolute, as if she were stepping over her own despair. Lara followed closely, clutching the small blanket she had just run home to fetch, her breath quickening but her gaze never leaving the white figure above. When they reached the top, Maria gently lifted the stork. It was so weak that it did not resist, its deep black eyes clouded with exhaustion, yet still glimmering with a hint of life. She felt a gentle warmth from its body, and in that moment, a spark of hope ignited in her heart, small, but enough to make her heart beat stronger. They brought the stork down and placed it on a dusty wooden table in the corner of the church. Maria fetched clean water from the river, each of her movements slow and careful, as if she were caring for a child. She wiped away the mud clinging to its snowy feathers, each streak of dirt washing away like a small part of the gloom in her heart. Lara, sitting beside her, patiently fed the stork sips of water from a tiny spoon she had found in her grandmother's pocket. The little girl's small hands trembled, not from the cold, but from absolute concentration. It will get better, right, Grandma? Lara whispered, her voice both a question and a prayer. That night, in the flickering light of the oil lamp, the old church became a refuge for three souls: Maria, Lara, and the stork. Outside, the cold wind blew through the cracks in the stone walls, carrying the murmurs of the Silver River. Maria sat by the table, her hands clasped together, telling Lara stories of old. She recounted the vibrant springs when flocks of white storks filled the sky like living clouds, and about the afternoons when she was little, standing in the fields with her grandmother counting the birds flying by. Her voice was warm, but at times it caught in her throat, as if the memories were battling with reality. Birds are the souls of this land, she said, gazing at the stork lying still. If they don't come back, our village will have nothing left but sorrow. Lara, though her eyelids were heavy with fatigue, did not take her eyes off the bird. She held her grandmother's hand, whispering, "It will get better. I know it." The faith in Lara's voice was like a small flame, warming Maria's heart amidst the cold night. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the thick fog enveloping St. Florian, the stork stirred slightly. Its trembling wings slowly opened, as if testing its strength after a long sleep. Maria and Lara stood silent, holding their breath, their hearts pounding in their chests. Then, with a powerful flap of its wings, the stork soared into the sky. It circled around the bell tower, its white wings glistening in the sunlight, like a streak of light chasing away the darkness of the past days. The sound of its wings resonated, strong and proud, breaking the silence that enveloped the village. Lara cheered, dancing on the cold stone floor, her hands waving wildly. "It's flying! Grandma, it's flying!" Her joy was pure like the ringing of bells spreading throughout the space. Maria stood there, her wrinkled eyes shining with rare happiness. She watched the stork until it was just a tiny white dot in the gradually blue sky. "As long as the birds keep flying back, St. Florian still has hope," she said, her voice firm like a vow. In that moment, she felt a part of herself soaring with the bird, a part that had been buried beneath sorrow and loss. News of the white stork spread quickly throughout the village. Some elderly folks shook their heads, saying it was just a coincidence, but children like Lara believed that Maria was the sky keeper, someone who had called the wings back with love and perseverance. Gradually, signs of life returned to St. Florian. A few sparrows chirped in the fields, followed by flocks of swallows fluttering over the rooftops. The Silver River no longer carried the scent of dead earth but began to shimmer in the afternoon sun, as if it too was awakening. Maria still sat by the river every day, weaving fabrics adorned with bird patterns, but now she no longer worked in silence. The laughter of Lara and other children echoed from afar, mingling with the cheerful songs of the birds. The sky over St. Florian, though still having gray days, was no longer a soulless void. It had found its spirit again, thanks to a white stork, the unwavering hearts of the two grandmothers, and the belief that, no matter how dense the darkness, the light will always find its way back. In the days following the white stork's flight from the bell tower, St. Florian seemed to be infused with new life. Although it wasn't completely restored to its former self, the village began to show signs of vitality. Little sparrows, with their chirping songs, appeared on the broken branches along the fields. Then came the swallows, which had been scattered by the flood, now returning to circle above the cracked rooftops. The Silver River, once murky and heavy, sparkled in the afternoon sun, like a silver ribbon winding around the village. The villagers, though still tired from the work of cleaning up after the flood, began to look up at the sky more often, as if they were waiting for something greater. Maria felt this change in every breath she took. Each morning, she woke up earlier, not out of obligation, but to listen for any bird song in the distance. Her hands, accustomed to weaving fabrics, now worked with a renewed vigor. The bird patterns on the fabrics were no longer just memories. They became prophecies, as if she were weaving the future of St. Florian. But deep within her heart, Maria still carried a vague sense of unease. One stork, although a symbol of hope, could not guarantee that the larger flocks would return. She wondered if the village would truly revive or if it was merely a brief moment of brightness before darkness returned. Lara, on the other hand, held no doubts. For her, the stork's ascent from the bell tower was a miracle, and that miracle would surely bring about other wonders. Each day, she ran throughout the village, her bare feet caked in mud, searching for signs of new birds. She carried a small notebook, a final gift from her father before he left the village, and meticulously recorded. Day 3, 2 sparrows in the willow tree. Day 5, 1 swallow perched on the barn roof. Laura believed that if she counted enough birds, they would call their friends back home. She often tugged at her grandmother's hand, excitedly sharing her bird diary, and Maria's smile each time was the greatest reward for her. One afternoon, as the soft, golden sunlight stretched across the fields, Laura ran to Maria, holding a tiny white feather. "Grandma, I found this near the bell tower!" she exclaimed, her eyes shining brightly. Maria took the feather, gently stroking it between her calloused fingers. She immediately recognized it as belonging to the white stork, the bird they had saved. A warm feeling spread through her heart, as if the bird was still watching over them from somewhere in the sky. "Perhaps it hasn't gone far," she said, her voice gentle but filled with a newfound faith. The news of the feather spread quickly through the village, and this time, even the skeptics began to pay attention. Mr. Hans, an elderly farmer living near the eastern fields, recounted hearing the sound of flapping wings in the morning fog. Mrs. Greta, the baker at the corner of the village, swore she had seen the silhouette of a flock of birds flying across the sky the previous night. Though no one could be certain, these stories were like gentle breezes, blowing through St. Florian and reviving conversations around the hearth. The villagers began to repair their homes, replanting the rows of crops swept away by the flood, as if they were preparing to welcome a new spring. Then one day, a true miracle happened. It was an early morning when the fog still blanketed the fields, and the sun had just begun to peek over the distant hills. Maria was sitting at her loom when she heard Laura shout from outside. "Grandma, come quick!" She hurried out, her apron still wrapped around her, and stood frozen at the sight before her. In the sky over St. Florian, dozens of white storks were flying in formation, their wings beating steadily, creating a lively symphony in the air. They circled the bell tower, the fields, and the Silver River, as if welcoming the village after a long slumber. Laura clutched her grandmother's hand, bouncing up and down excitedly. "They're back, Grandma! I knew it!" The sound of her laughter echoed, blending with the flapping wings of the storks. Maria said nothing, simply gazing up at the sky. Her eyes were misty with tears, not of sorrow, but of a happiness she thought she had lost forever. She felt as if St. Florian was breathing again, pulse by pulse, alongside the birds soaring above. In that moment, she was not just a weaver or a grandmother, she was the keeper of the sky, the one who held on to hope when everything seemed to vanish. The white storks did not just stop by St. Florian for a day. They stayed, nesting in the tall trees by the river, on the roof of the old church, and even on the dry branches that seemed to have died. Their presence invited other birds, swallows, sparrows, and mynas, as if it were a call from nature. The fields began to turn green again, the Silver River sang the song of life, and the laughter of children echoed throughout the village. The villagers began to call Maria by the name Laura had given her, Keeper of the Sky. Although she merely smiled and said it was Lara's doing, in her heart she knew that title was not just a compliment, it was the truth. Many years later, when Lara had grown into a strong young woman, she still kept that little notebook from her childhood, now filled with notes about birds. She often sat beside her grandmother under the willow tree by the river, where Maria continued to weave fabrics adorned with bird patterns. "Grandma, if it weren't for the first stork, would we have today?" Lara once asked. Maria smiled and stroked her hair. "It's not the stork that creates miracles, but our belief. As long as we believe, the sky will never be empty." St. Florian did not just come back to life, it became a legend, a village where the birds always found their way home, and where two hearts, one old, one young, had together preserved the soul of the sky. Seasons of spring passed, and St. Florian was no longer the desolate village from the memories of the flood. The Silver River now flowed gently, its banks lined with lush green willows where the white storks nested every year. The fields stretched wide, corn and wheat swaying in the breeze, affirming that the land had been healed. The red-tiled roofs were repaired, smoke wafting from chimneys each evening, carrying the scent of Mrs. Greta's baked bread and the laughter of children at play. The old church bell tower, where the first white stork was saved, was now decorated by the villagers with wildflower wreaths each spring, as a tribute to the miracle that changed their fate. Maria, now past 70, still sat by her loom each day. Her hair had turned as white as the stork's, but her eyes remained bright, containing the resolve of someone who had overcome darkness. The fabrics she wove were no longer just household items. They became symbols of St. Florian, sold at the monthly market in the nearest town. They were called fabrics of the sky, and each bird pattern told the story of the village's revival. But few knew that on quiet nights, when Lara was sound asleep, Maria often sat alone by the loom, her hands trembling not from age, but from the flood of memories from the past. Before she became the keeper of the sky, Maria had been a young girl full of dreams. She grew up during the prosperous years of St. Florian when her father, a hunter, often brought home bright feathers for her to play with. But one harsh winter nearly 50 years ago took her father away during a hunting trip in the mountains. Her mother, unable to bear the pain, left the village shortly thereafter, leaving Maria with her grandmother. It was her grandmother who taught her to weave, and through the bird patterns, Maria learned to preserve the memory of her lost family. When the flood came many years later, sweeping away everything she had built, Maria thought she would never find a reason to go on. But the white stork and Lara changed that. Each time she saw the flock of birds flying across the sky, she felt her father's shadow in the wind, and their songs were like comforting words from her mother. Lara, now 15, was no longer the carefree girl running around with bare feet. She had grown into a tall, slender young woman, her long brown hair tied neatly behind her, but her eyes still held the same curiosity and strong belief. The little notebook of her childhood had been replaced by a thick book, where she not only recorded her observations about birds, but also sketched them with delicate lines. Lara learned to draw from Mr. Hans, the old farmer who had once doubted the stork's miracle but had now become the most enthusiastic storyteller in the village. She dreamed of one day leaving St. Florian, not to abandon it, but to share the story of the village in far-off places, places that also needed hope, just as they once did. One spring morning, as the flock of white storks flew over the bell tower as they did every year, an unexpected event occurred. A group of strangers appeared in St. Florian, carrying cameras and notebooks. They introduced themselves as researchers from a major university, there to study the miraculous return of the birds after the flood. The leader, a middle-aged woman named Elsa with a warm voice, explained that they had heard about the Village of Wings from the merchants who bought fabric from Maria. "We want to document this story," Elsa said, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "It may inspire other places facing natural disasters." Maria, initially hesitant and unfamiliar with outside attention, looked at the strangers with a cautious gaze, her hands subconsciously tightening around the fabric she was weaving. But Lara, standing beside her, squeezed her hand and whispered, "Grandma, this is an opportunity for everyone to know about St. Florian. I want them to know what you've done." The determination in the girl's voice softened Maria's heart. She agreed, but with one condition. "Tell the story of the entire village, not just mine." In the days that followed, the researchers traveled throughout St. Florian, chatting with the villagers, photographing the white storks in the sky, and recording stories of revival. Lara became their guide, enthusiastically sharing the tale of the first stork, her notebook, and how her grandmother had kept hope alive. One afternoon, sitting by the Silver River with Elsa, Lara opened up. "I want to study in the city to learn more about birds and nature. But I will come back because this is my home." Elsa smiled and placed her hand on Lara's shoulder. "I believe you will do more than just keep the sky for St. Florian." When the researchers left, they gifted the village a wooden sign carved with the words, "St. Florian, the Village of Hope," which was erected at the entrance. News of their research spread far and wide, and soon, tourists began to visit St. Florian, bringing their curiosity and their own stories. The small village not only came back to life, it became a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest days, hope could find its way home. Maria, now older, often sat by the Silver River watching Lara teach the village children how to recognize bird songs. She knew that one day her granddaughter would leave, carrying dreams bigger than the skies of St. Florian. But she felt no sadness because she believed that Lara would always return, just as the flocks of birds found their way back each spring. One evening, as the sunset painted the river red, Maria whispered to herself, "I have kept the sky for you, Lara. Now it is your turn to keep it for the whole world." And on the old bell tower, a white stork landed, gently flapping its wings as if in agreement.